So I said something on our live show the last time that we were on, no, 2 times ago, that got me into a little bit of hot water. I used the phrase because it's nonprofit month. I said uh, that the nonprofit world is strange and unforgiving. It rubs some people the wrong way, especially people that work in the nonprofit world. What do you mean strange and unforgiving? We're doing great things. It's sunshine and rainbows, and and overarchingly, that's absolutely true. I've been working in the nonprofit world almost exclusively since I've left the military, with various organizations. I find it in many ways to be strange and unforgiving. Uh, and it just has some unique, quirky things to it that you don't find in other kinds of organizations. The nonprofit world is just its own beast. And so, what I wanted to do this week is talk about what it is that maybe makes the nonprofit world so different and why so many nonprofits get formed and launched and then disappear after a short amount of time. Because I think a lot of people have great intentions. I think most people have great intentions, especially the people that form a nonprofit. They have altruistic intentions. They want to do good things. They want to serve people. They want to help people. And there are some things about the nonprofit world that people just don't consider. And they form a nonprofit and then they realize, oh, raising money isn't easy. It's hard. Managing a board is hard. Managing volunteers is hard. Telling your story and getting people to care enough to evangelize on your behalf for your cause and your mission and your vision is hard. It's not easy. So many people are like, hey, nonprofit's great, man. I don't have to worry about revenue. I don't have to worry about product sales or development or anything like that. Well, actually, you gotta get people to part with their money, just not receiving any like a good or a service in return. You still have to get them to part with their money. It's harder. And that's one of the things in a sea of many things that makes the nonprofit world a very misunderstood ecosystem, especially for people that don't work in it, and especially for people who aspire to form their own nonprofit. There's stuff that you have to know. So if you are thinking about, if you have in the back of your head a bucket list or a retirement plan or a career transition plan, like I want to launch a nonprofit to help blank overcome blank or do blank or serve these people, here is what you need to know. And I brought somebody in that's way smarter than me to talk about those things. My very good friend, Rashidah Butler-Jackson of RBJ Community Consulting. She's a nonprofit pro expert. She knows all of these things. She helps nonprofits succeed for a living. And part of what she does is get people when they're in the ideation phase, and I don't want to say talk them out of it, but really get them to understand here is the full range of things that you need to know going into it. Because if somebody forms a nonprofit without the full picture and they don't succeed, it actually harms other nonprofits, especially other nonprofits who are trying to raise funds from the same pool of donors. There is nothing that will disenfranchise a donor or a potential donor quicker than having them give their hard-earned money up for a cause that they believe in, only to watch that cause fold or not have an impact. Then the next actual real nonprofit that's making an impact comes around and asks for money, and that donor's not going to do that again. And who could blame them? So when nonprofits fail, it impacts the whole ecosystem. In the veteran nonprofit world, man, there's no exception to that. We have almost 50,000, self-proclaimed veteran serving nonprofits in the United States. Good grief. You can't sneeze without hitting a veteran serving nonprofit. And not all of them are targeted, and they don't last long, generally speaking. and they end up taking donors and resources and volunteers away from the ones that are actually making an impact, that are targeted, that have that full picture and information, that have the tenure and the longevity, right? So this is important because I work in the nonprofit space. I work in the veteran serving nonprofit space. It's important. It's important to me. I might start my own nonprofit someday. I don't know. So I'm looking forward to picking Rashidah's brain. You'll recognize her if you've been watching the show for a while, because we had her on about a year ago. I think she might be our only return guest. That's how much I enjoyed her company the last time around. So I'm going to stop yapping, and we're going to bring Rashidah up, and we're going to do it right after this. It's shorter than the last bumper, and so like I try to fit in a sip of coffee, but it doesn't really work because it's only like 6 seconds long. The last one was 12. Rashidah's dancing over there. All right, I'm going to jump right into it. Rashidah, my friend, how are you? You're dancing. I think you're muted right now. Oh, there you go. Hey, what's up?
Yes, I'm here. Hi. It's so good to see you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well. Very excited. This is you're my only return guest. I'm pretty sure you're the only one who's come back.
Making history.
Yeah, there you go. So tell us first off a little bit about what you do and how you do it, and then we can dive right into like what are the things that if somebody comes to you and says, I want to start a nonprofit, you tell them, okay, here's what you really need to know that other people aren't going to tell you.
Oh yes, I love this question. Well, again, good morning, everyone. Rashidah Butler-Jackson from RBJ Community Consulting. And like Adam said, what I do is I support nonprofits and community organizations, primarily in the Milwaukee and surrounding area communities. But I also work with clients outside of Wisconsin. I do a lot of professional development, strategic planning for nonprofits, a lot of like staff support and development, project management and support, things like that. But like Adam said, one of my favorite things to do is help people to start their own nonprofits or figure out if it makes sense for them. So when someone comes to me and they say, Rashidah, I'm ready and I want to start a nonprofit, I'm that person that has to give that really tough but necessary love to make sure that they've done their homework and make sure that, we have this high in the sky dream of how we want to make impact, but we don't also have the ingredients that we need to make sure we can bake that pie and make it really yummy and successful and enjoyable. So we're talking business plans. We're talking market research. We're talking, do you actually have board members in mind that are not your cousin or your best friend or your spouse? Because there's conflict of interest there. That could be difficult when you're forming a board. So we have those really tough conversations and we really figure out if this is something you need to do, or is it better for you to try to support efforts that are already in place, like Adam said earlier, and help to fuel those missions with a little more impact.
How often is it that somebody comes to you wanting to start a nonprofit and they think they have an idea, but then you talk to them and you can just kind of see them shrink and wither as they get to understand how much they just don't know and how specialized of a space this is?
Oh my gosh. I would say I probably get nonprofit startup requests at least once a week. And what I do is I'll offer a 15-minute consultation to say, hey, let's talk about this. And then, like you said, by the end of that call, it's usually, thanks, I've got some thinking to do. I'll get back to you. And then you never hear from them again.
Oh, wow.
Oh, real.
No. But it's good. It's like, we at the chamber, we had a business incubator that every year this command post. And for us, a successful outcome is obviously getting seed funding or getting employees or premises, some sort of scaling. But a successful outcome for us as well is having an aspiring business owner realize that their idea or plan or ambition to be an entrepreneur in the first place is not a good idea and to go in a different path. That's a successful outcome because people put a lot of stuff on the line for something that's not exactly may not be the right thing. So how often do you see that? And what are the things that you tell those people that they need to know?
Yeah, that's really good. And I think it's awesome that you all do that. So offline, I want to hear more about that because
Mhm.
I'm like, I
Yeah.
want to be able to like give that as a model for what other people should be doing.
Mhm.
But yeah, it definitely, and again, it's not to discourage people. Like we were talking before we went live, we're not here to like discourage you and shut you down, but we want you to be successful. And like, for me, I'm not out here to just check the box of like how many nonprofits I can start. I'm out here to say in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, clients that I work with are still prospering, they're growing, they're successful, right? And so again, people don't even think about things like startup costs, right? Brand and marketing for your nonprofit. People don't treat nonprofits like businesses, and that is a problem in itself. The same way you run a for-profit business, the same way you run a corporation, you need a budget. You have to fundraise. You have to market. How do people get to your services? We're in the middle of a pandemic. How are you speaking to a virtual audience, right? When you would normally provide services in person. Do you have a plan for those types of things? And like, especially now with the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of nonprofits did not make it through this pandemic because the sustainability was not in place. So we can look at the data, we can look at the numbers and see that if you don't have that sustainability plan, you are not going to make it to see a year or 2 years. I mean, 50%, over 50% of nonprofits fail within the first 1 to 2 years. And that's the data. Like that's not me making that up. That is like what the numbers say. And we just don't
Right.
want you to
Right.
be in that category if we can help you.
Absolutely. You mentioned startup costs, and I think that's an important point. There's a lot of important points in there, but startup costs. We found in the for-profit business, helping people start their for-profit businesses or scale them, one of the startup costs that sneaks up on people that they do not even consider is subscription fees for digital platforms, like how much it costs you to have a website, web hosting, an Adobe membership, a Canva membership, a CoSchedule membership, all of those things that just pile up, the stuff that in our personal finance adds up. We cut the cable. We don't have big cable anymore, but then we have Hulu and Netflix and Disney and all of these things that just add up. But they can really, especially for on a business or enterprise level, those subscription fees are hefty and they add up. So is that also true in the nonprofit world? And what are some of those other startup costs that sometimes surprise people?
Well, even more so in the nonprofit space, Adam, because as you know, donor management is huge. So having CRMs, having donor management platforms, having a newsletter and a space, whether that's MailChimp where you're, collecting email addresses and building up your mailing and subscribing list. That is so important, particularly in the nonprofit space, because so much of nonprofit work is fueled by those individual donations and sponsorships. So investing in mailing because you're sending out those traditional thank you cards and letters, postage, small things like that that, like you said, you don't think about, but they add up within a year. You're spending tons of money on stamps and paper and, letterhead and printing and faxing and, all of these things come with a cost. So absolutely, I would say sometimes even more so. And then just guerrilla marketing, getting out, handing out flyers, going door to door, giving people pamphlets about the work you do. There's a cost behind all of that. You have to pay to get that sale. So absolutely in nonprofit work, it is super, super crucial.
Well, and a lot of people don't know that depending on how many people, MailChimp is a great example. They will charge you based on the number of active subscribers that you are sending your mail to. And, for like the Wisconsin Veterans Chamber, our mailing list, I mean, we're talking many, many hundreds of dollars every month. And that's stuff that people don't necessarily budget for. I mean, yeah, and we recently pared ours down. We took ours. It was, we took all the people who hadn't opened a newsletter in the last like 6 months, and we're like, you know what, we'll just go ahead and just cut you out. And we were able to reduce, our monthly fee as a result and increase our open rates and retention rates by a ton. But it's still several $100s a month to just have that. And you mentioned a CRM. So are you saying people that come to you that think that they can just manage all of their donors and fundraising stuff on a spreadsheet, you kind of steer them in a different direction? Let's talk about that.
Rashida, I have a planner. and I use sticky notes. What do you mean I can't manage the hundreds of clients I'm gonna have? You give that a go and come back in 3 months and let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
show
Like
me your.
spreadsheets can only take you so far.
Mhm.
You
Absolutely. Yeah, show
know?
me your Trapper Keeper in 3 months.
So
Yeah. Like,
yeah, right, exactly. And then
yeah.
they're like, okay, so you mean I can't do that? And I'm like, yes, we have to realize that like running a business, and especially because the other piece of this, Adam, is tracking numbers. When those donations come in, they can't just live in a notebook and you write down who gave you money and how much. You have to file your 990s at the end of every tax year. Even if you don't make money, you still have to tell the IRS you didn't make money. So having an accountant, having a system that tracks your expenses and your income and your donations, again, having a follow-up system for your donors so that you can work to retain them and really like flush out those relationships and strengthen them. Like again, all of that stuff, you can't track that in Excel. Google Sheets is wonderful, but it is not going to get the job done if you want to grow and really expand the work that your nonprofit is doing. So like you say, hundreds of dollars, and that's just for one platform. I remember when Facebook and Instagram went out. Do you remember that a couple months back?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, business owners were like, what are we going to do if it doesn't come back? Because you don't have a website, you don't have a LinkedIn presence, you don't have any other space to market. So at bare minimum, you need to have a website. And I would suggest investing a little money in it if you want it to be, a visual of who you are and what your brand is. I mean, the free templates are great, they'll get the job done, but eventually you want to add on, you want to be able to take payments, you want to be able to take donations, and so you're going to have to pay. But like, we can't depend on Facebook and Instagram forever to market our businesses. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, Facebook
Can't do it.
Facebook cannot be your main platform. You know, whether you have a lot of website traffic or not, a majority of your traffic could come via Facebook referral, via Instagram referral. That's fine, but you have to have a home base. You can't put all of your eggs in one marketing basket, and definitely not on a social media platform, because it's especially depending on your target audience. Your target audience may not be using Facebook, and if you put all your eggs in that basket, or they could be Facebook users now, but in 5 years they could all be using Instagram. And then what are you going to do? You need to have a home base, and that costs money. But what it also does, and you mentioned a CRM, client relationship management system. You meant that costs money, obviously, but you also have to put time and resources and effort into learning how to use that software, and how to not only use it just to track things, but to make projections, because you have to inform a board or potential donors on your future potential and all these things. How much education goes in, and how much time do people have to set aside to just get educated usually, and how much of that, when you tell them, is like, oh man, I don't know any of this stuff, when you're dealing with an average client?
Really, really good question. So I always kind of tell people, especially if it's a brand new platform, you're going to spend, and people really don't believe this, but I mean, you know this to be true. Most of your week sometimes is spent learning that platform, learning the features, learning how to use it. A lot of these platforms offer like tech support or technical assistance. So you're setting up calls with those representatives several times a week. How do I do this? How do I run this report versus this report? And what's the benefit of running this report versus this report? Do I want to track that data, or is that important for me? So even just sitting down and figuring out how you want to use a CRM can take hours upon hours to figure out how to make it work for you. And especially, again, I'm saying it, since the pandemic, these CRMs have changed so much. Zoom has added so many features. Calendly has added so many, because they realize that digital is on the rise. So now, if you were familiar with CRMs before, you're still having to learn the new features and the new add-ons and the new ways to create subscriptions. So it can take, I recommend taking at least 10 to 15 hours of just playing with the platform, sending out test emails, figuring out formatting for your newsletter. All of that stuff takes time. It really, really does. You might have an email list for one thing, but then an email list for something else. And how do you make sure that you're populating those email lists properly? Do you want to track demographics around zip code and gender? And, like all of those types of things, you have to take time to figure out. You can't just say, I have a CRM, work. Like, do the things I
Right.
want you to do. It does,
And
again, it doesn't work like that. So,
you have to take the time to do the research on the front end to make sure that you're getting the right CRM, because the thing about using software, if you have a nonprofit, if you are getting enough donors and building enough relationships to keep your nonprofit alive, that means you have enough that is worthy of being managed by a CRM. You really just can't live these days without it. But you have to make sure that that CRM is right for you and right for your organization. And because almost every facet of your organization has at least a toe in with that CRM. There's so much that it's dependent upon. If you pick the wrong CRM, one that doesn't have good customer support, one that isn't right for your organization, holy cow, you spend all this time investing and building all of these processes and logistics and operations for your organization around it, only to determine that, like, this is not a good fit. I need to go to another CRM. I'm sorry. I've been through 3 CRM migrations with 2 different organizations. 3. Migrating a CRM is one of the most awful things that you can do, and it's almost hard to recover from because nothing ever translates. So how much do you really harp on people, like, not just learning how to use the software, but you need to devote time to make sure that you're not wasting your time?
well, first of all, Adam, I feel for you. Like when you said that, it traumatized me just through like indirect, because I know CRMs are no joke. So my prayers are with you, my friend. I hope that you're recovering from that well.
Yeah.
The other piece of it is absolutely like some people don't even know what CRMs are. And they're like, do I need a mailing list? You absolutely need a mailing list. Like sometimes we treat mailing lists like they're a thing of the past. And I don't think people really see the value in what a mailing list is and how it can be used, right? And like the beauty of being able to reach this broad audience in a really specific and unique way. So even people that don't, if someone comes to me and I'm like, well, do you have a CRM, or like how are you going to manage your clients and your customers and the people that you're working with? Well, what's that? Do I need to do that? I was just going to have sign-in sheets at the front and let people, and I'm like, all right, red flag. Red flag. Adam, we should have called this just like the red flags of nonprofit startups, because red flag. You think a sign-in sheet is going to do it? Then you want to apply for a grant and you don't have any numbers, you don't have any data, you don't have any stories about the people you're serving, and you think somebody's going to give you $50,000 when you cannot provide any tangible thing that tells them why they should give you money. You should be tracking everything, how people come to you, right? Like, how did you hear about our nonprofit? Because you need to know what's working. People don't, right? So, like, if nobody is hearing about you from Facebook, you might want to scale back. That doesn't mean totally become, non-existent on Facebook, but maybe putting more time into Instagram if that's where all your customers are coming from, or your clients, or the people you're serving. I love that you talked about cleaning up your mailing list. Do you know you should look at your open rates, your click rates, the turnover rate of like, are people actually, coming over and like clicking to the blog and clicking to the website for your newsletter? Like, you have to know all of that stuff if you're running an organization, because you need to know what's working. And especially as a smaller startup, time is of the essence. So we cannot afford to waste time on things that are not giving us a return. So
Absolutely.
again, I'm talking to people and I'm breaking some of this stuff down, and they're like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Then you're probably not ready.
Absolutely.
You're
It's
probably not
incredible.
ready.
People view nonprofit organizations as something that's really fueled on good vibes and warm fuzzies, and, like I said earlier, sunshine and rainbows. But you mentioned the mailing list, for example. Um, Definitely not a thing of the past. If you have a targeted mailing list, in that you didn't just fill it with people that you bought off the internet or people that didn't know you or whatever. If it's filled with people who are they know they're being included and they want to be included, if it's a targeted mailing list, your click-through and conversion rates on that thing will be 10 to 100 times what it would be on Facebook, and for a fraction of the cost. But also, having something like MailChimp or some sort of a relationship management software to understand what those click-through rates are, because you don't get big money grants for warm fuzzies and feelings. This is a data-driven industry. And that's something Rashidah and I, years and years and years ago, worked for a nonprofit together, that when it came to data, holy moly, did they have their stuff together. They just, everything was intro surveys, outro surveys, 3 month later surveys, data compilate. I mean, they really did that right. And as a result, they were able to say, here's our outcomes aren't just, well, these people had this great thing happen. It was, here's how many people we impacted and to what extent, with numbers and data and percentages. And that's how they were able to get the grants and the financial support that they needed to keep going. And they're still going and successful today because they're largely data driven. How many people that you tell that to, that have the trapper keeper and the planner, you tell them you need to be logging so much data, it's going to make you uncomfortable. How many of them just don't even believe you because it seems like too much until you're actually there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of people are very anti-data. Like people are scared of numbers. People are scared of conversion rates. People don't understand the value in data. Now, when I start to talk about money, now their ears perk up. Because like I just said, if you want grants, if you want people to give you money, you got to be able to tell people why. Why you starting a nonprofit and why do you matter? Because like you said, Adam, I can go over to the different chambers of commerce. They got it together. I know what they're doing. They're reputable. They're in the community. Okay, you're a startup venture nonprofit over here. Why should I give my money to you instead of giving it to someone who's established, who has impact, and that those numbers, that data, that time that you put into really telling the story of the nonprofit is going to make all the difference. So when you start talking about the money piece of it, now people listen. But even if it's not money, you need to know if what you're doing is working. What you're doing is working, excuse me. So if you're not collecting data, if you're not collecting satisfaction surveys, if you're not collecting data about from your clients that you're working with, that says, hey, yep, I'm better because this service came into my life. I understand myself better because this service came into my life. Then how do we know that what you're doing is working? So when you break it down like that, then people kind of start to hear it. But again, data is not the automatic thing people think about when they get excited about the warm and fuzzy. Because data is not always warm and fuzzy. Data can disappoint you. Data can be tough love and like a hardcore conversation that you're not ready to have. And that's not warm and fuzzy, but it is a wake-up call for us to make adjustments so that we can do what we set out to do. I can't just start a nonprofit because I love puppies, right? Like you have to have more than just I love puppies and I want to start a nonprofit to help puppies. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's just not. So data is
I remember
like your why and sustainability.
I remember growing up. We had a main street in my city growing up, and there seemed to be a revolving door of new businesses that would come in last 6 months and leave. They'd come in last 6 months and leave. And there were a lot of crafting and hobby shops of very specific niche things. And I remember we would drive through and my dad would say, none of these people have done market research. He's like, just because you are into model airplanes doesn't mean that this store on Main Street in downtown Sun Prairie is right for a model airplane store. Like, if you're into it, that's great, but passion does not equal business. And he'd be like, they're gone in 6 months, and they'd be gone in 6 months, and they'd be replaced by another niche hobby thing that I'm sure could have been successful somewhere, but not there. Not in that place, not for that audience, not for that city, not at that time, because they thought a hobby or a passion could fuel everything else. And that doesn't make it marketable. And I think nonprofit folks are 10 times as guilty of being, for better or for worse, for being pulled by their purpose and their passion and their desire to serve others, into almost deluding themselves into thinking that they don't need to worry about the businessy sort of things like the data and the numbers. And like you said, you have to have the data, one, to inform your decisions. Is what I'm doing working, or am I spending $5,000 a month on Facebook ads that end up costing me $250 a click, like, and also because you have to tell, grant funders are not going to give you money without data. And so in addition to grants, I want to ask you, uh, the fundraising aspect, well, I'll just ask people for money. That's easy. I've heard it 100 times. Like, oh, we'll just raise money. Let's ask people for money. It'd be great. Uh, how easy do people think it is to get people to part with their money to support a brand new cause, and how many of them come crashing down to reality in short order?
If I had to give it a percentage, because again, fundraising is just that thing that like it's not even my thing. So
Mm.
listen, I hate asking people for money. It is not easy at all. Probably 80% of the people that I talk to feel like I'm just gonna do a Facebook fundraiser. I'm gonna do a GoFundMe. I'm gonna
Mm.
do a, like all of these different platforms of like people are gonna give me money because they love me. And what I always tell people is like, I sell Color Street. I sell Color Street nail strips. Like that's something I do on the side. It's something I love.
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
something I enjoy. When I
mhm.
first started selling Color Street, all my friends and family bought Color Street because they wanted to support me. They were like, "Oh, Rashidah, you're selling nails. We'll buy a couple sets." Cool. Do you think that return rate has been successful? Absolutely not. I have had to go outside of my friends and family because people will support you once and think they've done their job. So if you're thinking that your friends and family are going to support your nonprofit for the next 10 years, you are sadly mistaken. It takes a lot of research before you even talk to a donor. You have to research. What are they passionate about? Who have they given money to in the past 3 to 5 years? What organization are they a part of that you might be able to speak to? How do you connect? What do you have in common? All of that takes time and research before you even get to the ad. So yeah, you can throw out a Facebook fundraiser for Giving Tuesday and you might get $500 or $600. But again, sustainable fundraising, it is a skill set that honestly not a lot of people have, especially when they are just like, I want to start an organization because I'm passionate, because you're not even thinking about what it takes to run it. Everybody can start a nonprofit. Like, I just want to be very clear. You fill out the 501c3 paperwork, you get the state paperwork, you get an EIN, you're a nonprofit. But to keep a nonprofit and to maintain the nonprofit, it takes a skill set of being able to know how to ask for money and reach people in a way that is not just, well, you're my family, so give me money. Or you love
Right,
puppies too, give me money. Like,
right,
again,
right.
doesn't work that way. Red flag.
Well, and when you're passionate about something, that's where that comes in. I always found, like, it was a lot easier to ask for money when I believed in what I was asking for. I had no problem. And it's a lot easier when you really take the time to develop relationships with people, because then it's almost not an ask. Like, if I know John and Jane Smith are really excited about X happening in their community, and I come to them and say, like, hey, here's a project that I think you'd be really interested in that we're looking for support from, the checks write themselves. But is building your relationships to those points and being able to convey the story and the need in a way that gets those checks to write themselves. It's like an overnight success that took 25 years of hard work to get to. You know what I mean? It's like every fundraising ask is that. And so people think it's easier to do, but it's not. I had a buddy who started a nonprofit, brilliant guy, ended up being very successful with it. But the first year it was a GoFundMe, and then a Facebook fundraiser, and then 2 weeks later another Facebook fundraiser, and another one 2 weeks. And so, like, each Facebook fundraiser collected less and less and less and less. And it's not that people cared less or supported him less. It's that they gave their donation, like you said. They did their thing. And so you need to be able to expand and reach more people and tell the stories of the impact. And data helps, but also just plain old fashioned, like you said, boots on the ground, face to face marketing. And just because you're passionate about something and believe in something doesn't make you an effective storyteller or marketer. So how much of a reality check is it for people that maybe have passion but aren't that comfortable putting themselves out there, but then they realize that that is an absolute part of it that you cannot skip?
Well, this is why I tell people too that it's super important to think about how you're building up your team, because as a nonprofit founder, you don't need to know all the things. It's like I don't
Mhm.
want to send this message that you have to be a fundraiser and you have to be a data person and you have to be a programs person. That's not, I don't think we're saying that. What I
Sure.
am saying is that you have to have an eye for what that looks like so that you can build up your team to have the right supports and the right people in place. So again, if you don't even understand nonprofit fundraising for yourself, how can you find board members who are skilled in that to bring to the table? So you still have a due diligence and a responsibility to understand the pieces that make up
Mhm.
successful nonprofits, even if it's not your skill set. And that's why, how you form your board, what the interns you bring in, the volunteers that you bring in, being able to know what you need and why you need it is key when you're trying to expand. So, again, like you said, Adam, I did not envy you. When we worked at that organization together, I saw how you used to go out every day and literally have to build relationships and how to work with people and try to teach them about the work we were doing and why they should care about it. And like that is, again, that's not something that I'm good at. But I was like, all right, that's Adam's thing. And one of the things that I love that you do on LinkedIn is you talk consistently about authentic relationships. You cannot just hop in my DMs on LinkedIn and say, Rashidah, come get insurance through me because I added you on LinkedIn. Right. And it's like, you don't even know me or like my story or who I am or if, and so you talk about that all the time. But like in nonprofits, it's absolutely the same. Take that same philosophy and apply it to like, you can't come and say, sit on my board because you love puppies and I love puppies. What you can come to me and say is like, Rashidah, I've been watching you. Like, I see how you love facilitation. You love program and project management. I have, like you said, this nonprofit, this project I'm building. Here's some specific asks. Would you be interested in joining my board? Or would you be interested in connecting me with someone who wants to join my board? You got to do your homework. You can't just say, oh, I like you, you like me, be on my board. I like you, you like me, be my social media person. So there's so much work, Adam. I mean, and again, like I feel like a 45-minute conversation is not enough for us to dive into. It's like we need like a 10-part series to talk about this because it's like there's so much. And again, I'm not here to discourage. I'm just here to keep it real. That like, I mean, the data that you share about how many veterans serving nonprofits there are, it is astonishing to me. It's like what? And I just told you because of you, I'm getting more familiar with that space. But I don't see these other organizations. I don't know the impact. I don't know, and that's not a knock to them, but it does mean that like, do we really need to keep creating them? Or do we need to centralize our support and our efforts and join the board for the nonprofit? Volunteer at other nonprofits, become a mentor at the nonprofit, donate your money to the nonprofit instead of creating a whole nother one that does the same stuff. How can you fuel something that's already existing? And so I give people
I think that's an important step one. Does your nonprofit idea already exist in your area? The people who you're trying to serve, is there already somebody trying to serve them in a similar fashion? And Elaine saying, wow, insightful and helpful. Appreciate you watching, Elaine. And yeah, that's our first comment today from LinkedIn. LinkedIn gets the first comment award. Thank you very much, Lane. So yeah, you have to know, is there somebody already doing it? Are you going to crowd the space out? Are you being redundant? That's a huge issue, redundancy. Or do you have a specific target or niche that's a little bit different? Okay, then if so, that's fine. But that's an important consideration. So let's say someone has finished listening to this 45 minutes, 30 minutes of us saying, here's a sum of the realities, because the reality, the actual thing is a little bit bigger and even more scary than that. But they are not deterred. They say, I can and will do all that. I think I have a thorough understanding. I'm gonna do this. I'm not being redundant. There's nobody in my space, in my area, that does this and will do it in the way that I plan on doing it. And these people still have a need that's being unserved. I'm going to serve it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to market. I'm going to get our CRM. I'm going to know how to do it, use it. I'm going to ask people for money. I'm going to, I got startup costs. I'm going to do all these things. What do you tell that person then? What is step one after coming to terms with all of those things? If they are not deterred, what do they do? How do they start a nonprofit?
Well, kudos to you if you're not deterred after all of this. And I need that type of resilience to bounce back. Write it down. I want to see a business plan. I do not take on nonprofit startup clients unless they have a business plan. And your business plan cannot be a one pager. It can't be a two pager. I need to see a thorough business plan of market research. Have you looked at within a 10-mile radius all of the organizations that serve the same demographic you're trying to serve? Do you have your startup costs mapped up and a plan for where those dollars are coming from? Do you have a mission? I mean, Adam, I know a while back we talked about mission and vision, personal mission statement, business mission statement, mission, vision. Do you have a logo? Do you have a name for your business? So I want to see all of that in a business plan. And when you say business plan, that's a scary word for people. Oh, I can't just tell you what I want to do. You won't just do it if I tell you what I want to do. You won't help me with the paperwork. No. Because if you haven't written it out for yourself and taken the time to invest for yourself, how do I know that you're going to take the time to invest in a nonprofit? The nonprofit is a heck of a lot more work than a 10-page business plan. So if you can't even commit, discipline yourself to do a 10-page business plan, I don't think that you're ready to run a nonprofit. And that is usually the thing where people are like, okay, can we set up another call in a couple months? And you never hear from them again. But that is
Well,
the first
and
thing.
running the numbers,
I'm happy to share it with people.
running the numbers is sometimes enough to get them to understand that this is not something that they should be doing. Sometimes that is enough. Just running the numbers portion of it, not even the market research, how much money they think they need on a month-to-month basis to survive.
And even without a brick and mortar, because a lot of people are running organizations without buildings and office spaces. So even without, because people are like, well, rent and, all these types of things. No, we're not even talking about brick and mortar costs. We're talking about overhead costs of, like you said, running month to month, just running a business and all that it takes. So like, yeah, if you're looking at those numbers and truly mapping it out, and then saying, well, I'm just going to do a GoFundMe. Okay, do the GoFundMe first, get the money, and then come back and talk to me, right? And then, Adam, the last thing I want to say is, like, I call it the Toddler Effect, right? Where it's like, but why? And we know we've all been there where, like, our kid is asking a question, and then you answer it, and they're like, but why? And then you answer it again. You go another level. You peel back that onion, and they say, but why? Right? So I call it the Toddler Effect. I tell every client I work with, I want you to go as deep down as you can. Okay, I want to serve veterans. Why? Well, because I'm a veteran. Okay, why? Why did you become a veteran? Let's talk about that. Like, why is that important for you?
That's great advice.
Oh, and keep going down. And if you realize that you get stuck at, like, I want to serve veterans because I'm a veteran, that's probably not the best reason to start a nonprofit. You can't go deeper. So,
man,
I'm done.
There's so much. There's so much good information in there, and oh, by the way, having a business plan will not only inform your decisions, and it, is a requirement for somebody like Rashidah to be able to work with you and support you in the first place. But anyone who funds a startup nonprofit will need to see it too. They'll need to see it too. That's super important. Rashidah, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. I feel like we could talk for another hour about this. Let's set a date. Let's do this again next nonprofit month, for sure. I have your website along the bottom there for anybody that's interested in learning more. She has a free resource. If you go, it's what is it? Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's a basic resource guide I put together, 3 pages that kind of talks about basically everything we talked about today. I have a link that I can share for a business plan template and just some other free resources to kind of help you get started on the path to starting a nonprofit. So yeah, check it out.
Excellent. Yeah. And that's RBJ Community. For those of you that are listening, rbjcommunity.com. And I will put, if you're listening via the podcast, I'll go ahead and put that link in the show notes. She has on the top, it says Free Nonprofit Startup Guide. She's one of the best in the business out there. And you can tell very knowledgeable, very personable. She wants you to succeed. So definitely make sure to connect with Rashidah on that. And Rashidah, I'll ask you to hang on the line here for just a minute. Thanks again, man. Talk about value. Goodness gracious. If you're thinking about doing a nonprofit, that was $1 million conversation and some great information from, like I said, one of the absolute best in the biz. And not trying to discourage anyone out there. That's stuff you need to know. because you can tell she's passionate about your success. And I want you to be successful too. The Chamber of Commerce wants you to be successful too. We want you to succeed. So we got to tell you the whole situation, warts and all. It doesn't serve you to candy coat it, not one bit. So we appreciate you tuning in. We're here every Wednesday, 11:30, same time, same place. Or if you're listening via podcast on Monday mornings, on your favorite podcast platform. So drop us a line, leave us a review, give us a follow, all of that fun stuff, folks. I really appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you next time. Have a great rest of your week.